Welcome to the Seriously Absurd podcast, where there are no stupid questions, only inquisitive idiots.
Hey, Zax.
Hey, Lab.
What's the question for today?
So today, we're going to talk about computer monitors and what the ideal number and size, or resolution, of displays would be.
So, I think we have to preface this with both Zax and I are very tech and computer-oriented people.
Mm-hmm.
So, your mileage and what you find useful may vary if you're not one of those people. But we're going to press ahead anyways with our very limited viewpoint. How many monitors do you have, Zax, and what kind are they?
Currently, I have 3 ultra-wide monitors. 2 of them are 34-inch ultra-wide monitors, and they are stacked vertically. And then off to one side, I have another ultra-wide monitor that is 29 inches, but it is oriented in a portrait orientation.
Wow. So you have a acreage of screen real estate going on there.
Yes, and I do find it to often be not enough.
So my idea is that basically your need for monitors expands to fill however many monitors you have. So if you had more monitors, you'd use them. And that goes essentially without limit. So what I have is 2 24-inch 1080p monitors, which is woefully inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got them as a present actually in 2014, and they're due for an upgrade. And I was actually planning to upgrade them either, in the next 2 months or so. So this is valuable for me because I need to figure out to what should I upgrade. Because I was thinking, do I want an ultra wide? Would that be better? Do I want to continue with high refresh rate monitors? Because right now I have 144 hertz monitors. Or, what is the direction to go within some reasonable amount of budget? So the reason that I have not gotten an ultra wide, and that an ultra wide is not necessarily on my list right now, is because I believe that there is a value to having the monitors or having your screen real estate be segmented into discrete displays. I like to have one thing that is full screen, and then my other monitor can hold the smorgasbord of other windows that I want to have visible to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that would be more difficult in an ultra-wide. What's your experience?
So it depends a lot on manufacturer. Some ultra-wides have multiple inputs and are logically separated into different displays in either half of the ultra-wide. I don't know of any brands off the top of my head that are currently doing this, but this is something that was done previously. Similarly, there are displays which are large format 4K displays that have 4 inputs and divide the display up into 4 logical screens so that you can maximize into the different quadrants, and it behaves as perceived by the computer as 4 distinctly separate screens. Actually, for a while at work, I was using a 4K TV as my primary monitor. So a 4K, what was I using? I think it was a 43-inch TV, is basically like having an array of 21.5-inch 1080p screens in a 2x2 grid. And it is a great amount of real estate for doing businessy stuff, doing coding, web surfing. You pull up reference material very easily while you're working on a project. You've got a chat window open. You've got your Outlook open. Like, you can fit everything on a 4K display and be productive. That being said, I did still have 2 more displays off to the left-hand side in a portrait orientation, one of which held the chat application that I was using at the time, the other which held my Outlook inbox. So my inbox was always on display.
That's the real benefit, is having stuff that you care about always there.
Right.
It's like the personal equivalent would be like Discord. You just have a place where Discord lives. That's where it always is.
I do.
Yeah, so there you go. And, well, first of all, are your monitors curved?
No.
Okay. Do you have thoughts on if they should be or if you'd like them to be?
So I kind of like the idea of a curved display because of the whole like optimizing for your eye distance from the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to stack them the way that I currently have my two primary displays stacked, I don't know that I would be able to angle them appropriately without creating a weird gap in the displays.
Oh yeah.
Right now, because I have two flat displays, the way I have them mounted, there is the tiniest hair of light that I can see peeking through between the two displays. And I actually have the top display mounted upside down so that I can still access the bottom mounted controls on the display while it is in the mount.
So I was also debating on the ultrawide. This is now a podcast about finding me what monitors I want to use, by the way, because I can't really evangelize my setup because I want to replace it. I think it's out of date.
Well, why did you choose high refresh rate?
So, I mean, I want to say that I'm a gamer. I'm not that much of a gamer, and I don't derive a lot of use out of high refresh rate monitors. I play like Kerbal Space Program and Minecraft and sometimes Rocket League. So, you might say it's not worth the expense or the additional complexity, but I think there's use even in, the everyday usage of your monitor to have a high refresh rate. We saw this with phones, which are going through the same thing right now. Phones, as proficient as they may or may not be at gaming, they're all getting these, Apple calls it a ProMotion display, which is 120 frames per second or higher.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, all the demos and all the performance gain is like a smoother scrolling experience.
Yeah.
It's not about games. It's just about the process of using your phone, or in this case, your computer, for, your average everyday needs. And I think 144 hertz or 120 hertz is still providing you a benefit there. So I'd probably like to stick with that.
Okay. So all of my displays are several years old, and they are all 60 hertz displays. I have not used a high refresh rate display in quite some time, with the exception, actually, of the TV that I was using as a monitor at work because it supported high refresh rate input. So I could actually take a 120 hertz 4K 444 chroma signal as an input in that TV. And it looked wonderful, but most of the time I wasn't moving things around enough to really appreciate it. It's nice when it happened, but it wasn't really happening very often. And so my quest for monitors has gone through quite the evolution. I remember the very first time that I used a multiple monitor setup. I had gotten a temporary job working for a large tech company, and they had given me two displays. And I had never had a computer with two displays before. And this was, to give you an idea of how long ago this was, they were CRTs. But it was just a magical experience. And ever since then, I was like, I got to have at least two displays. And I remember when I had gotten an ultra wide, and I was like, this is basically like having two displays. But then I started adding to it and adding to it. And one thing that I did experiment with, and I'm really annoyed that the technology is not quite there, is that there is a VR application called Virtual Desktop. And you basically get an unlimited virtual screen that you can organize your windows onto and your applications and whatnot. But the fidelity of VR screens is just not good. Or is at least not good enough to justify daily driving a desktop environment inside of a VR headset.
Yeah, it's a little too futuristic for me.
It's a novel concept, and it in the amount that I did use it, it was interesting. But things like reading text was very difficult because it just didn't render with the fidelity that it needed to in order to not give me eye strain. And, once we reach a point where a VR headset display can actually do that, I think that the only display that we're really ultimately going to need is the tiny little display that is inside the headset, because everything else can then be virtualized. Because the way that our eyes work, I can only really look at a very narrow field of view with high fidelity. And everything that's out at the periphery, like I can detect motion, I have limited sense of color, but I can't count objects precisely or identify fine details and things like that. And so being able to virtualize the interface to an application in a sort of targeted way with, the thing that you're looking straight ahead at has the highest resolution, then the things at the periphery have a lower resolution. I believe they call it foveated rendering.
Yes.
So something like that, I think, in the not too distant future, will make for a really compelling desktop user experience.
Do you use your desktop though without ever looking at anything but your desktop? It's like in the last podcast we were talking about water, keeping glasses of water at our desk. Are you just gonna fumble around trying to get that because you don't have an easy view of it while wearing a VR headset?
Well, I mean, that's the kind of thing that you can very easily integrate into the environment. A lot of VR headsets nowadays have,
A camera?
yeah, an external camera, and it's the sort of thing that you could perhaps integrate into the environment, making, rather than doing augmented reality, it would be reality augmented virtual reality.
That's I don't think that's gonna happen. It's like what if you wanted to show your wife something on your computer? Do you
Uh,
just need a second headset so you can
right,
view
right. It would be
both of it at
second
the same time?
headset, or it's possible that there would still be screens in use for things like that. But I can foresee a future where maybe there is more AR in our sort of day to day lives, and rather than a VR headset, maybe everybody's just wearing an AR headset most of the time. And there's been there have been a number of kind of interesting hypothetical science fiction explorations of what an augmented reality future actually looks like, where you don't need to actually buy any decorations for your walls because your AR headset just paints your walls virtually. It
I've seen that science fiction and it's all very dystopian.
I don't know that it's dystopian. I mean, at the end of the day, your perceptions of the wall are going to be the same whether you're looking at a sort of semi holographic projection of art versus looking at art. You may not actually, you don't touch the art on your walls, so limiting it to just a visual experience, I don't think it's. I just don't know how different it would be. But anyhow, monitors.
Okay. Yeah, so going back to physical monitors and not the abstract concept of a monitor.
Hmm.
Uh, so here's what I'm thinking for what I'm going to buy soon. And I want to know your thoughts. So I was thinking I would go from two 1080p 144 hertz at, 23.6 inches or whatever they are. I'm going to buy three 24-inch or maybe 27-inch, depending, 1440p monitors at probably 120 hertz. Does that seem like a logical jump for you?
How would you lay them out?
That's what I don't know yet. So right now, my layout is I have a monitor directly in front of my face, and then I have a monitor off to the side next to it.
Hmm.
So it's asymmetric around my head.
Same.
Because I have two monitors, I have the center one and one at the right. I didn't want to have it symmetrical to where I'm just looking into the gap between my monitors.
Right.
So I was thinking maybe I would continue that and have it in an L shape. So I still have the central monitor and then a monitor to the right and then a monitor above that right monitor
Okay.
to where I've got the central one and then a stack of two to the right. Or I would have to do more rearranging of my office to do this, but have the standard three monitor setup where it's, all next to each other in one horizontal line. I'm really not sure.
Okay. What about doing two stacked directly in front of you and then one in portrait mode off to the side?
Portrait mode is a big thing that a lot of people evangelize to me, and I'm not really convinced I'd like it that much.
Have you tried it?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And because I already have portrait mode in the sense that I put most windows, in fact, in one half of my 1080p screen.
Hmm.
So it's an 8:9 display instead of a 16:9 display. So it is portrait mode, and I get that benefit that way. I don't need it to be 20 inches tall or whatever it is when your whole monitor is in portrait mode. When I can just segment my existing monitors into portrait-sized windows if that's what I want.
Okay.
So should I do the three in a row or three in some other configuration?
I think that if you do the three in a row, you're going to find yourself turning your head a lot, and I don't know if that would be good or bad in your environment. The thing that I was going to suggest is, if not doing two stacked in front of you and one off to the side, you could do two side by side and then one on top over the gap.
So it's like an equilateral triangle.
Yeah. Or do an inverted equilateral triangle where you have a single display directly in front of you and then two sort of Mickey Mouse ear displays above it.
That would be weird because I feel like I've never done this to where I had monitors stacked on top of one another,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like it would be odd to be interacting with content on that top monitor. Do you know what I'm
I
saying?
do know what you're saying.
It's like you have your hands on your keyboard or your mouse, and then you'd be looking up at it.
Right. That monitor I use almost exclusively in my configuration for YouTube, Netflix, etc.
So you're just looking at it. You're not aggressively interacting with it.
Not usually. Sometimes, if I am working on something, like if I am doing certain projects where I need, like I have the main application I'm working in, and then I have like a reference image or reference document that I'm looking at, and I'm also looking at like some data, and I have to use all three screens. Then yes, I will actively be using that screen, but it's a quick glance up, and also I have that display sort of tilted down a little bit, so
It's still looking up. It's like
yeah.
when I look up into the theoretical space where I'd put this third monitor, it's like I have to tilt my head. It's not just an eyeball movement there.
Oh, this is just an eyeball movement for me.
It's like I'd be, at the upper reaches of my eyeballs if I were to do
How
that without moving my head.
how far do you sit from your display?
Uh, do I have a tape measure handy here? I don't, and I don't really want to measure it on the podcast, but not far.
Okay.
Reasonable amount. I don't think you'd say I'm too close.
Would you estimate it at more than 2 feet?
Here's what I'll do. I will sit where I sit and I will extend my arms. When
Okay.
I extend my arm completely, in my normal seating
Uh
position,
huh.
the tip of my middle finger is maybe an inch away from my monitor.
Okay. When I do that, the tip of
So
my middle finger is about a foot away from my monitor.
how big are your monitors?
34 inches.
Okay, mine are 24 inches. So we're in roughly the same ballpark there in terms of angular distance. So, yeah, I could move them further away, though my desk is not that deep. They couldn't be further away because
Are
then they'd be through the wall.
are you using the stand that they came with, or are you using a like a clamp mounted monitor arm situation?
I'm using a dual monitor stand.
Okay.
So it's like there's one stand and then it holds both monitors.
Got it.
It's like a third party thing, but it's not a clamp.
Okay. So yeah, you can't really get much further away from them.
I couldn't even if I had a clamp because my desk is against the wall
Yeah.
and right now they're only like 6 or 8 inches away from the wall. So I couldn't go that much further. And I'm unclear then, would I want a larger monitor and be further away from it, assuming I could,
Yeah.
or would I want a smaller monitor and sit closer?
I think what you should do, instead of getting three displays, I think that you should get a large format display that has four inputs. I think that you should get a large format 4K display that has four inputs.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have
Then
any that would be 120 hertz though, or 144.
I mean 4K 120 is possible. It's like at the edge of display specifications. But
Yeah.
I mean at the same time you'd get, maybe the logistical benefits of being able to treat them as separate monitors. But if you just wanted to watch like one thing, like watch a movie, then you really couldn't that easily. And if you tried to stretch a video across all four monitors, you'd probably end up with screen tearing.
Potentially, yes. That's true.
So I'll have to look more into that. I don't think I'm going to go for curved. I don't think I'm going to go for an aspect ratio other than 16 by 9, just because I think that's the most utility I can get. 16 by 9 or maybe 16 by 10.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to go for a modest upgrade in resolution from 1080p to 1440p. I don't think I want to go 4K because I don't think my monitors are going to be big enough that I can use 4K without display scaling. So I want to run at 100% scale. Because like on my laptop, which is 13 inches, has a 4K display.
That's too many K.
That is too many K for a 13-inch monitor. And it means that Windows has to run at like 200% scale.
Yeah.
which it's generally good at, but there are still, problems and bugs that occur when you have to do that. So I probably wouldn't do that. But I think I would want a little bit more resolution, a little bit more sharpness, just to try and see that.
Hmm.
So that's my plans. That's what I think about it.
I wish you the best of luck on finding a new monitor configuration, and I applaud you for co-opting the podcast for this discussion.
Yep, it's free Zach's labor. Thanks, Zax.
Thanks, Lab. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Seriously Absurd podcast. Please come back again next week for a discussion about simulations.